My name is Erin, I'm 30. The night I finally understood my place in my family, a nurse was standing beside my hospital bed with my phone in her hand. She had already told my parents I was being taken into emergency surgery. My mother's answer was, "We can't come tonight, Kelsey needs us." Kelsey is my younger sister. And for the first time in my life, I was too scared to pretend that sentence didn't hurt. A few hours earlier, I had been at home when a sharp pain hit low on my right side. At first, I thought it was a cramp. Then I tried to stand and nearly went to the floor. I called my best friend, Tessa, because she lives 10 minutes away and because, somewhere along the way, I had stopped calling my parents first when something went wrong. Tessa drove me to the emergency room. After blood work and scans, the doctor told me one of my ovaries had twisted and lost blood flow. He said they needed to operate quickly. I remember asking, "Tonight?" His face told me there was no other answer. The nurse asked if I wanted my emergency contacts called. My parents lived 25 minutes from the hospital. I said yes. She called from the room because my hands were shaking too much to hold the phone. My mother answered on the third ring. The nurse explained that I was stable, but being prepared for emergency surgery, and asked if someone could come. There was a pause. Then my mother said, "We're at our other daughter's house." The nurse repeated, "Erin is going into surgery shortly." Mom said, "I understand, but Kelsey needs us tonight. Erin is strong, she'll understand." The nurse looked at me before ending the call. It was one of those looks strangers give you when they've just learned something about your family that you spent years trying not to see. I told her it was fine. That was my specialty. Fine. Kelsey is 27 and has 2 kids, Noah and Lucy. Her husband, Ben, was away overnight for work. Lucy had a fever and had thrown up twice. Kelsey had called Mom because she was overwhelmed and didn't want to handle both kids alone. At that point, that was all I knew. So lying in that hospital bed, I imagined the worst. Maybe Lucy's fever was dangerously high. Maybe Kelsey was heading to another emergency room. Maybe my parents were choosing between 2 actual crises. I told myself there had to be a reason. Tessa didn't say much. She just squeezed my hand and stayed. When they wheeled me toward surgery, she walked beside the bed until they made her stop. Right before the doors closed, she said, "I'll be here when you wake up." And she was. My parents were. I woke up after sunrise, groggy and sore, with Tessa asleep in a chair under a hospital blanket. There were 2 texts from Mom. "How did it go?" And "Call when you're awake." No missed call from Dad. Later that morning, Mom told me the night at Kelsey's had been a complete crisis. Lucy's fever had come down. Noah finally fell asleep around midnight. Kelsey had been emotional. Then Mom said, "You know how she gets when Ben is away." I asked, "Did you know I was going into emergency surgery?" She went quiet. Then she said, "Yes, but you were already at the hospital. You had doctors. Kelsey had nobody." I looked at Tessa, who was pouring water for me. I said, "She had both of you." Mom sighed. "Erin, please don't turn this into a competition." That sentence almost made me laugh. I had spent my whole life being told there was no competition, while somehow always coming second. When I was 17, my parents missed the dinner after my scholarship ceremony because Kelsey had a breakup and shouldn't be alone. When I moved into my first apartment, Dad canceled helping me because Kelsey was nervous about taking her car to a repair shop. Every time, I heard the same explanation. "You're the strong one." I used to take it as a compliment. By 30, I understood what it really meant. You can handle being disappointed. You won't make us feel guilty. You'll still answer next time we need something. 2 days after surgery, Kelsey came to see me. She walked into my apartment carrying soup and flowers. She sat down and said, "Why didn't you tell me it was emergency surgery?" I stared at her. "What do you mean?" She said Mom had told her I was at the hospital for a procedure, and that Tessa was with me. Kelsey said she had asked if Mom and Dad should go. Mom told her no. She said I hated being fussed over and would rather recover quietly. That was the moment the story changed for me. Until then, part of me had been angry at Kelsey. I thought she knew what was happening and still kept them there. She hadn't. She didn't even know. Kelsey looked sick when I told her what the nurse had actually said. She put her face in her hands and whispered, "I would have told them to leave." I believed her. And somehow that hurt more. Because there hadn't been two sisters competing for our parents that night. There had only been one decision. My mother had made it. If you've ever been called the strong one, when what your family really meant was the one who can be neglected without causing a scene, tell me in the comments. And subscribe for more family stories where the truth comes out when people finally stop making excuses. Kelsey and I talked for almost 2 hours. It was probably the most honest conversation we had ever had. She admitted she had always known our parents rushed to her faster. She told herself it was because she was more emotional and I was more independent. She had never asked what that cost me. I told her I had resented her for things she didn't always choose. Kelsey started checking on me every day after that. She brought groceries once. Ben came over and fixed a loose cabinet handle. Tessa kept showing up too. Apparently, real support is less dramatic than family speeches, and more like somebody remembering you still can't lift a laundry basket. My parents came by on the 4th day. Mom brought a casserole. Dad carried it. Mom did the talking. Dad stood behind her. She said she was sorry I felt abandoned. I hate apologies that turn your pain into a misunderstanding. So I asked one question. If Tessa hadn't been there, would you have come? Mom looked at Dad. Dad looked at the floor. Then Mom said, but Tessa was there. I said, that wasn't my question. She reminded me Lucy had been sick. She reminded me Kelsey had been alone. She reminded me that I'm capable and good in a crisis. I finally said, stop calling me strong when you mean convenient. Dad looked up. Mom stopped talking. I told them I wasn't asking them to choose me over Kelsey forever. I was asking why they couldn't choose me once, on a night when I was being wheeled into an operating room. Mom said, we made the best decision we could at the time. I said, then I'm going to make decisions based on what I learned from it. They left 10 minutes later. No screaming. No slammed door. Just a casserole sitting, untouched on my counter. For the next month, I stopped automatically saying yes. That was harder than I expected. Mom asked if I could pick up a prescription for Dad because I worked near the pharmacy. I said I couldn't. Kelsey asked if I could watch the kids while she had a dentist appointment. I almost said yes out of habit. Then she stopped herself and said, actually, forget I asked. You're still recovering. That mattered. Not because babysitting would have destroyed me. Because someone finally noticed I didn't have to be available just because I usually was. About 6 weeks after surgery, my parents planned a weekend away for their anniversary. 2 days before they left, Mom called and asked if I could keep Noah and Lucy overnight because Kelsey's childcare plan had fallen through. I said no. Mom immediately said, it's one night, Erin, family shows up for family. There it was. The sentence people love using when they need something from the person they didn't show up for. Before I could answer, Kelsey cut in. She was on speakerphone with Mom. She said, stop using me as the reason. Mom went silent. Kelsey continued. I already found someone. Erin doesn't need to do this, and you don't get to say family shows up after what happened at the hospital. For once, I didn't have to defend myself alone. Dad came to see me the following week by himself. He sat at my kitchen table and admitted he had wanted to leave Kelsey's house that night. He said Mom told him I would be angry if they came because I didn't like people hovering. He knew that wasn't really true. He went along with it anyway because arguing felt harder. I told him, easy for you still meant expensive for me. He nodded. Then he apologized without explaining it away. That didn't fix everything. But it was the first apology from either of them that felt like it belonged to the person who made the mistake. My relationship with my parents is different now. Not destroyed. Different. I don't tell them everything first anymore. I don't build plans around the assumption that they'll be there. And I stopped wearing the strong one like a family medal. Kelsey and I are actually closer. A few weeks ago, she called because Lucy had another fever. Then she laughed and said, "Don't worry, I'm not summoning the entire family." I laughed too. It was the first time we had been able to joke about any part of that night. I used to think being strong meant needing less. Now I think strength is knowing when being dependable has turned into being taken for granted. My parents didn't miss my surgery because they hated me. They missed it because they had become comfortable with the idea that I would always understand. And I did understand. That was the problem. So now when someone tells me, "You're strong, you'll be fine," I listen for what they're really asking me to accept. Because being the strong daughter should never mean being the daughter nobody has to show up for.